Hi everyone, we're here to talk about a hot topic at the moment, which is the current number of HMRC inquiries into R&D claims. We know that HMRC have got highly aggressive in terms of their approach recently, and just want to explore some of the areas around that today. So, Jonny, why are there so many inquiries from HMRC at the moment? Why has the landscape changed so much?
It's a really good question, and having been in R&D for 15 years, the rate of inquiries has never been as high as it is right now. So even if you rewind the clock 2 years, it was probably 1 in 100 R&D claims to get inquired into, and now it's about 1 in 10. Ultimately, it's the culmination of HMRC's interpretation that R&D, or the R&D tax relief scheme, is being abused. That's through error and fraud. So HMRC's latest accounts that were released only kind of earlier this month in July have stated there's over £1 billion worth of R&D payable tax credit to SMEs that was paid out that shouldn't have been. They've done a kind of a deeper analysis of a number of claims and have extrapolated some results, and they found that, well, in their interpretation, R&D isn't taking place to the extent that the claims submitted are evidencing, and therefore they've overpaid. So they're now using that as a lever to reduce the amount of R&D that they're paying out going forward.
So that's interesting. So is there almost a tightening of the rules and how HMRC are perceiving R&D? Is that a shift in the pattern from what we've seen previously?
Yes, and so I guess the one thing to say is the definition of R&D itself has not changed. You know, the definition of R&D being that you must be undertaking a project that seeks to achieve an advance in knowledge or capability in a field of science or technology, and does so through the resolution, or attempts to do so through the resolution, of scientific or technological uncertainty. That's been enshrined in R&D legislation for 20 years. Yeah. What is changing is how strict HMRC are now in relation to that. So the inquiries we've seen in the market are generally targeted around what companies have stated to be their advance, so that what they're creating as their scientific or technological advance. And HMRC are pushing back right now and saying, yes, you're creating a new project, a new product or process or service or solution, but you're doing so using known technologies, just doing it in a way that no one's done before. So it might be complicated, so it might take you some time, but actually it's not advancing technological knowledge, and you're not really resolving any level of technological uncertainty. It's just following a process.
Yeah, and so that kind of challenge in terms of the advancement, is that the key kind of lever that HMRC are using when they're opening an inquiry at the moment?
Yeah, so from all the inquiries that we've seen in the market, and a lot of companies have been really kind and shared what they're seeing, you know, what they've had with us. And I would say 90% plus of the inquiries focus wholly on what that advanced criteria is. So it's focusing on saying, well, you're claiming this is an advance in computer science. Well, actually, is it really? Are you advancing computer science or software engineering? Or is it that you're doing something that somebody hasn't done, but actually they could do if they tried to?
Okay. So for the people that are listening to this call today, some of them might have already received inquiry letters, some of them may have recently made a submission. What should people do if they receive an inquiry letter from HMRC?
The first thing I guess I'd like to advise clients is not to panic. Like, actually, again, a few years ago, an R&D inquiry was a rarity, and these days it's so commonplace. Like I said, it's about 1 in 10 claims are getting an inquiry right now. So if you've got an inquiry, you're certainly not alone. What I would suggest is taking the time to consider the evidence that you've put into HMRC so far and the questions they are asking. And I realise that sounds very much like read the letter and respond, but actually what is key is to respond to the points HMRC are asking. So we've seen a number of responses go into HMRC, either by companies themselves or other advisors, that say, read the report or something along those lines. And actually that isn't a helpful attempt at resolution, because HMRC will have read the report and they haven't got the information they need from the report. So they either need it signposting, or they need more articulation as to why what's in the report maybe haven't quite got there. And it's about, so HMRC rightly can't infer that there's R&D taking place. So if you put a bunch of text on a page that suggests that R&D probably is taking place to enable these. That's not strong enough. You now need to be able to say to HMRC, this is the advance. Yeah, this is what technology enabled us to do at the start of the project, and this is what I needed technology to be able to do for the project to be a success. So that gap, that's my technological gap. That's my technological advance, and so many inquiries are around that gap and articulating that gap. So you just got to be really careful about what you evidence to HMRC.
Yeah, got it. So again, it's going back to looking at the nature of the inquiries that are being raised and really challenging that kind of technological advancement point and really actually providing them with the robustness and the answers that they're looking for. Because if you're getting an inquiry, they have queries and questions fundamentally in and around what's actually been written in the narrative so far. Interesting. What are the options for resolution? How do companies go about resolving the issues and identifying the problem, the inquiries with HMRC?
There's a number of routes that are available to companies. So the default route is letter. So generally speaking, HMRC will open an inquiry by letter. Occasionally it comes via email, but it will be a letter to say, here's a compliance check into your R&D claim for the period ended, whatever the period end is. And in it, they'll say, thank you for your report. I just have these further questions. And they'll ask a number of questions. So I've seen it as small as 5 and as high as about 45 in terms of the number of questions HMRC ask. And it depends on the size of your claim, the level of evidence you provided, the kind of the essentially how much confidence HMRC have in your claim, but also in their challenge of your claim, I suppose. Yeah. So default position number 1 is to reply to that letter. That quite often resolves a lot of the questions. So HMRC would generally, particularly at the moment, they're asking quite similar questions. We're seeing similar themes develop around the project. So they'll ask a few questions around the technology and then a few questions around the costs. Generally speaking, you can box off the costing related questions through letter because they're factual. They're either are or they aren't R&D, or they are or aren't subcontractors or staff or whatever the question may be. But we've found pretty consistently that a letter response doesn't tend to resolve the technological aspects of the inquiry. And we've seen some claims go through 4, 5, 6 iterations of letter back and forth, which, if you bear in mind, each response is HMRC try and reply within a month, but we're seeing kind of 6 to 8 weeks between submissions and responses from HMRC at the moment. You times that by 4, 5, 6, plus they give you a month to reply. Like, you could be sitting on an inquiry from receipt of your first letter to resolution of the inquiry. Even if it's successful, it could still be 6, 8 months down the line.
Yeah. But would you say that's normal for the resolution of a inquiry, or have you seen other instances or heard of other instances which have been resolved much quicker? And what was the output of that? Were HMRC willing to just kind of almost accept if the arguments are strong and therefore then say, actually, yes, we agree with the amounts you put in, or have they been kind of saying and reducing the quantum of the R&D claim?
It's a good question, and I suppose one thing I'd advise is almost a bit of a mindset shift, because actually, so HMRC are the gatekeepers of the R&D regime, but they aren't they aren't looking to crack down. They aren't looking to reduce R&D claims. What they need to see is evidence of the R&D, and if they see the evidence of the R&D, they approve the claims, and they will resolve inquiries. And we've been involved with inquiries that have been successfully resolved, right? And we talked about letter resolution. Actually, quite often the quickest way to a resolution is to jump on a call with HMRC, to get HMRC's inspector plus potentially some tech specialists from within our HMRC to talk to the company's tech specialists. And if you can do that, generally speaking, that resolves the inquiry a lot faster. So that comes with some risk as well, because the technologists need to understand what is and isn't R&D, and they should know that as part of the R&D claim process anyway. But they just need to be aware of couching project terminology in commercial language rather than technological language, and so there's just a bit of a risk that needs to be mitigated against if you're going to consider a call.
Good stuff. I think the final point for today is just saying we've seen a number of instances where HMRC have paid out on the R&D credit, but that doesn't mean that's not a resolution. And HMRC have paid out in the past and then inquired at a later stage. So there is, in the past, and I think there's a misconception there where people believe that because the HMRC have paid, there will not be an inquiry. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. We're going to do a wider and longer seminar on this, so we'll share dates in terms of next steps, but then we can start to delve into some more of the detail around further areas that may be questioned, identified during the inquiries, further topics on resolution of those as well, and also just slightly different viewpoints taken within different individuals within the organisation, because that can have a bearing on the impact and output from the inquiry as well. Thank you all for listening. Speak to you soon. Bye.